What do you think equality consists of? Who is a client and who's a patron in such a situation? What dishonesties, I'm serious about this, will insinuate themselves into our thinking as a way of accommodating the consequences of the real disparities in human development in this environment that we're engaged in? Now, can we be honest with each other? We're patronizing people at the highest levels of selective intellectual performance in the great universities of this country, in the great programs of science and engineering and social science and humanities studies. We are patronizing the disadvantaged group. I'm talking about Blacks. I'm talking about the acquired capacities to perform particular kinds of intellectual work.
Okay, but I hear you, Glenn, but I'm thinking about the acquired capacities of the next generation, whose father or mother got a PhD from a top school, and maybe they weren't the top in the class, and maybe they got a lot of help getting through because they had because they had poor preparation, or maybe it's just their talent. They weren't that talented, but they were helped, and that made a difference to their first job and to their success, and that fed through over time. I mean, you've written about this intergenerational transmission of inequality. You're the star in this area. This is where you're going to get your Nobel Prize from, some of this work that you did. So I'm just going to bring you back to your earlier work, that what we do now is going to have an impact through time and permeate. So this is not a all or nothing. This is a very nuanced balancing act. And I think that's what the Supreme Court said. You can use race to a certain extent to balance the class, and you can go overboard, take people that are not well prepared, who are going to miss the beta prime. But over time, by interacting with other students who are going to get the beta prime, if they can, stick in the course and get through, then that will percolate through time to their children, and that will matter for the next generation. So we have to think of this as
okay. So I got two questions. I hear you. Think of it in a dynamic context, intergenerational, and so forth. We're not locked into the patronizing situation. We hope to evolve into a more equal situation as the benefits from what we do percolate in terms of making more prepared and more competitive the next generation. So I have two questions. How long and why race? How long, why race? So we're a half century. I mean, the speech that you just gave, which was a good one, I mean, I'm moved by it, no kidding, was given first in 1966. And we're a half century on, so how long? But the other question is also really important. It's important in the age of Trump. Why race? Because the claims on behalf of mitigating the deleterious consequences of previous generations' deprivation is a claim that white people can make too. The logic here in the affirmative action debate about wanting to be colorblind is, I mean, you can trivialize it and say, oh, they mean we're just supposed to pretend like races don't exist, which of course no one with any good sense should say. But you can also make it into a more rigorous idea, I think, by saying that the point is not to shackle any particular administrative practice, like who gets admitted to a university. The point is to formulate the national goals and the policy objectives in a way that doesn't essentialize race, that doesn't make race into a value in and for itself. And that would mean that if I had a concern about the lagging effects of previous generations' disadvantage, however that disadvantage came about, I would want to express that concern through programs that were not necessarily racially defined. And I do want to come back to this issue about honor, the group's reputation, respect, the kind of social dynamics of intra-organizational behavior in which you actually do have a sharp division of labor, and you do have a stratified hierarchical order in terms of how the collective team's product is being generated. whether it be a university or a manufacturing facility or whatever. And the objective differences in people's cognitive functioning, not capacity, not intrinsic ability, they're functioning. Because these are educational institutions that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on a lot of issues there. You know, we could try and just say, well, look, anybody who's disadvantaged, we're going to give extra help to. And that, you know, if you're disadvantaged, a poor white person versus being a poor black person, it's the same disadvantage. I don't think that's the case. I think there's real racism in this country. I think there's, I mean, you say how long, why is it that in Hungary today we have anti-Semitism at the highest levels being, we have attacks on Soros by the Hungarian prime minister because he's Jewish, not because of any other, this is subtle or overt anti-Semitism. Hungarians have a good history of anti-Semitism, of killing Jews during the Nazi period. They were the right arm of the Nazis to a large extent. They're at that time. And imagine that policy versus a policy where the Hungarians were taking every child to the main synagogue in Budapest and showing them where the Hungarians, not the Nazis, massacred hundreds of Jews in the synagogue during World War II. That would be a whole different future of Hungary. So, but what I'm trying to get across here is that there is persistence of racism that seems to be tribal, that's going to go on for centuries. We have to be fighting against it on an ongoing basis. So how long? I say forever. We need to be fighting racism forever, because every indication is that the racism persists. And
well, I don't want to allow you just by the back of your hand to assimilate affirmative action policies to fighting racism. I think those are distinct. Those are distinct things. And we were talking about how long affirmative action in the context of educational institutions based upon providing opportunity for future generations. I think there's an impossibility theorem here, Larry. You can't have equality if you have a permanent structure where you have the racial preferences.